Welcome back to AI History Daily, where we use the power of artificial intelligence to bring history's most complex and consequential stories to life. Today, we're diving into one of the 20th century's most seismic events, a revolution that toppled a dynasty, shocked the world, and whose echoes are still shaping global politics right now. This is the story of Iran, of oil and empire, of a people pushed too far, of cassette tapes smuggled across borders, of millions filling the streets, and of a dream that became something no one fully intended. This is the story of how a king fell and what rose in his place. From the CIA-backed coup of 1953 to the secret police who terrorized a nation to the extraordinary coalition of students, clerics, merchants, and guerrillas who brought an empire to its knees, this is the full story of the Iranian Revolution, told in 9 chapters. This is The Fire That Remembers. If you're new here, welcome. Hit subscribe and the bell so you never miss a story. Let's dive in. Prologue, The Keeper of Fires. In the time before the beginning, which is not really a time at all, but a place stories go when they are not yet being told, there is a creature made of memory and smoke. She has no name that translates cleanly into any living language, though she has been called many things across the centuries. The Simurgh, ancient bird of Persian legend, her feathers threaded with the knowledge of 10,000 years. The watcher at the edge of empires, simply the chronicler, she who tends the fires of men and decides which must be remembered. Now she turns her ancient eyes toward a specific fire, a fire in the 20th century, in a nation that calls itself an empire one morning and a republic the next. In a city called Tehran, where the air smells of diesel and rosewater and the slow, patient accumulation of grievance. Chapter 1. The Ghost of 1953. Let us begin with a sin. His name is Mohammad Mossadegh, and in the summer of 1953 he is 71 years old, the elected Prime Minister of Iran, and he is about to be destroyed by a government that has decided it knows better than the people who voted for him. Mossadegh has done something economically audacious and morally straightforward. He has nationalized Iranian oil. For decades, the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, a British concern, had extracted the black wealth of the Persian earth and returned to Iran a humiliatingly small fraction of the profits. The fields near Abadan burned perpetually with flared gas, and the Iranian workers who lived in their shadow occupied tin-roofed shacks without running water, while the British staff lived in a country club world of swimming pools and cricket pitches. The comfortable, carefully maintained ignorance of people who have decided that the distance between themselves and the people they employ is a fact of nature rather than a choice. Mossadegh said, "The ground is ours." He was right. The British declared this theft and organized a worldwide boycott. They went to the Eisenhower administration with one word: communist. Mossadegh, they said, was creating a vacuum that the Soviets would fill. The Tudeh Party, Iran's actual communist party with genuine Soviet connections, was growing in the political instability. The threat was not wholly invented. The Cold War was real. The Soviet Union's ambitions in the Middle East were real and documented, and American policymakers faced a genuine dilemma. A nationalist prime minister they did not control, an unstable country next to a hostile superpower, an oil supply too important to gamble with. They still made the wrong choice. Operation Ajax, August 1953. CIA money funding street mobs and purchased military officers. Chaos seeded through Tehran's neighborhoods. A democratically elected government overthrown in a matter of days. Mossadegh arrested in his pajamas. He would live under house arrest for 14 years, dying in 1967 in the village where they had caged him, not executed, not rehabilitated, simply kept still until time accomplished what violence had started. Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi was restored to his peacock throne. The Simurgh notes the American calculation for the record. It was not pure cynicism. The fear was real. But real fear does not sanctify the method, and the method was to put your hand inside a democracy and remove its beating heart because you were afraid of what might grow in the garden if left untended. The Iranians who knew what happened, who watched it happen, who remembered Mossadegh before and after, did not forget. Memory of this kind does not fade with time, it compounds. The Shah was restored to power with American help and spent the next 26 years simultaneously resenting and depending on that help. The psychology of a man who knows he owes a debt he can never repay, and who has chosen, as men sometimes do, to resent the creditor rather than acknowledge the debt. His closeness to America became, in the eyes of his people, not a symbol of modernity, but of subordination, and the ghost of Mossadegh, the man who had briefly made the oil Irans, drifted through the following decades, sitting in the back of every conversation about sovereignty, whispering, "You had it once." The Simurgh writes in her ledger, "Some debts are not settled in money or power. Some debts wait for a generation. Then they collect." Chapter 2. The King of Kings and his Peacock Throne. Mohammad Reza Shah is not, by nature, a man of deliberate cruelty. This is important, and not a compliment. Deliberate cruelty implies a relationship with the people one harms, a desire to see suffering, some form of recognition that the person in front of you is a person. The Shah is something more dangerous than cruel. He is indifferent. He has confused the map of his nation with the territory, the appearance of a prosperous modern Iran with the experience of living in it. He throws a party at Persepolis, the ancient Achaemenid capital, of such Baroque extravagance that the estimated cost runs to $300 million. Tents flown from Paris, food by Maxims, 50,000 imported trees planted for the occasion and removed when the guests leave. He calls himself Shahanshah, King of Kings. He introduces the imperial calendar, dating from Cyrus the Great, replacing the Islamic calendar in government use with a bureaucratic decree, as if the 14 centuries of Persian Islamic civilization were a detour from the main road. His people, a third of whom live without clean water, watch. The instrument of fear. SAVAK, the Organization of Intelligence and National Security. Founded in 1957 with assistance from the CIA and Israel's Mossad, trained in methods that intelligence agencies do not publicly acknowledge. It is everywhere, and everyone knows it. In the university lecture halls, professors choose their words with the care of men diffusing explosives. In the newspapers, editors maintain invisible lists, topics that must not be touched, names that must not be printed, arguments that must not be made. In coffee shops, friends communicate in code, in implication, in the grammar of the unsaid. What SAVAK does in the prisons is documented in Amnesty International reports. Electric shocks, sleep deprivation, the extraction of fingernails, the creative cruelties of men given authority over other men's bodies and told the nation requires it. The Shah disputes the numbers when Western journalists raise them. He disputes them with the serenity of a man who has arranged never to see the rooms he cannot see. Fear travels the way disease travels, through contact, through family, through networks of trust. Every Iranian who knows someone arrested or who watches someone return from Evin prison, transformed and silent, becomes a carrier. The infection moves through neighborhoods, through student organizations that keep forming and being shut down, through the mosques where something particular is happening. In the mosques, the clerics preach. They preach about Hussein at Karbala and the eternal confrontation between the righteous and the powerful. They preach in the elliptical language of men under surveillance. And slowly, the present tense begins to enter the sermons. Chapter 3. The White Revolution and its Black Costs. January 1963. The Shah holds a referendum on what he calls the White Revolution, a revolution without blood, imposed from above, requiring no one's opinion and tolerating very little opposition to it. Land reform, nationalization of forests, women's suffrage, a literacy corps, profit sharing for workers. In subsequent years, the program expands to 19 points, an encyclopedia of modernization issued by royal decree. Some of these things are genuinely good. Literacy programs that will educate millions. Women gaining the right to vote, which is right and just regardless of the political context in which it is granted. Health corps that bring medicine to villages that have never seen a doctor. The Simurgh notes this carefully because the temptation in a story about revolution is to make the thing being overthrown purely monstrous. And the Shah's Iran was not purely monstrous. It was something more complicated, genuinely modernizing, genuinely improving certain lives, and simultaneously deeply unjust in its method, its distribution, and its absolute intolerance of disagreement. But how a gift is given matters as much as the gift, and the White Revolution is given the way all the Shah's gifts are given. Take it, or face Savak. The Great Uprooting. The land reform is the biggest disruption. Iran's rural economy, organized through centuries of sharecropping and landlord-tenant arrangements, is dismantled by decree. Peasants receive plots of land, often too small, without the irrigation infrastructure or credit access or technical knowledge to farm independently. The traditional village structures that organized around the mosque and the local cleric dissolve. What arrives is a state bureaucracy that speaks the language of planning and not the language of the village. So the people come to the cities. They come to Tehran and Isfahan and Tabriz in hundreds of thousands, then millions, carrying everything they own. Some find the industrial economy the White Revolution promises. More find the edges of cities, shanty towns without sewers, rooms shared with 12 people, construction wages that shrink each year as inflation climbs. The oil wealth is flowing, Iran on paper is prosperous, the GDP climbs. Western businessmen fly in on Pan Am to sign contracts. Tehran's northern neighborhoods bloom with imported French fashions, American appliances, restaurants where the menu is not in Persian, because the clientele finds this appropriately cosmopolitan. In the southern neighborhoods, people are waiting for the prosperity to arrive. It does not arrive. What arrives instead is the inspector with his arbitrary fine and the price control that applies to the Bazaari's goods, but not to the Shah's imports, and the corruption that is not incidental to the system, but structural. The Pahlavi Foundation enriching the royal family under charitable cover, contracts flowing to friends of friends, the great oil wealth of the nation moving through channels too narrow to reach most Iranians. Two institutions resist the Shah's modernization with the quiet tenacity of things that have been here longer than he has: the bazaar and the mosque. The merchant class has conducted commerce in Iran's covered markets since the medieval period. They understand profit better than any planner, and they understand that the regime's favoritism toward Western imports and its arbitrary bureaucracy are not modernization, but predation. The ulama, the clerics, the scholars of Islamic law have had their landholdings cut, their educational role diminished, their entire history reframed as a detour from the true Persian story. They are angry in the particular way of people who have been told their life's work is embarrassing. The Bazaris and the clerics find each other. They have always been close. The same families send sons to the madrasa and the bazaar. The merchant's shop faces the mosque across the same courtyard. But now they discover a common enemy. When they act together, they will be the skeleton of the revolution. Chapter 4. The Voice from Najaf. June 1963. The Holy Days of Ashura, the Shia commemoration of Hussein's martyrdom, the annual public grief that is the emotional center of a faith built on the memory of righteous suffering. In the city of Qum, a 61-year-old cleric named Ruhollah Khomeini delivers a sermon. He says the Shah is a servant of foreign powers. He says the White Revolution is an assault on Islam and the ulama. He says Israel is threatening the foundations of Islam. The Simurgh pauses here because this last statement requires honesty that the political history often avoids. Khomeini's animosity toward the Jewish people and the Jewish state is not a diplomatic objection to foreign policy. It is the animating core of a worldview that will, after 1979, become the Islamic Republic's defining orientation. Holocaust denial from the podium of state television, funding for organizations whose purpose is the murder of Jewish civilians, a foreign policy structured around the elimination of the State of Israel. His characterization of Israel in that 1963 sermon is not the beginning of a political argument. It is the beginning of a 4-decade theology of hatred, and it poisons everything it touches. Savak arrests him. There are protests, demonstrations in Qom and Tehran that the Shah's forces suppress with bullets. The day is called the 15th of Khordad, June 5, 1963, and it becomes a wound that does not heal. The Shah, calculating that execution would produce a martyr, sends Khomeini to Turkey instead. From Turkey, he goes to Najaf, the Shia holy city in Iraq. where he will live for 14 years, teaching and writing and becoming, slowly, the center of gravity around which all Iranian opposition orbits. The Shah has made the classic error of men who mistake geography for reality. He has removed Khomeini's body from Iran. He has not removed Khomeini's voice. The cassettes. From Najaf, Khomeini lectures. His lectures are recorded on cassette tapes, technology so humble, so invisible to the surveillance apparatus that no one in the Shah's government initially thinks to focus on it. The tapes travel in the pockets of pilgrims, in merchant luggage, through the mail. They are copied and recopied on machines available at any electronic stall. In tea houses and private homes, people gather around small players and listen to the voice from beyond the mountains. What it says is both ancient and startlingly radical. Velayat-e-Faqih, the guardianship of the Islamic jurist. In the absence of the hidden imam, the 12th imam, who Shia Muslims believe disappeared in 874 CE and will one day return to establish justice, the governance of Muslim society must belong to the most qualified religious scholar, not a king, not a parliament, a jurist. This is not a return to classical Islam, it is an innovation, a reimagining of Shia quietism as activist political theology. He moves to France in late 1978 to a house in the Paris suburb of Neauphle-le-Château, and the world's press comes to him. He tells them there will be democracy, freedom of the press, women's rights will be respected, religious scholars will merely advise. The secular left hears only the anti-Shah message and believes him. The liberals hear the anti-imperialist message and believe him. The religious conservatives hear the Islamic governance proposal and believe him. He has become all things to all opposition, and the Simurgh, who has seen this before, who knows what comes after, notes in her ledger that a coalition built on a mirror will not survive the moment the mirror is removed. In a house in the Armenian quarter of Isfahan, a family gathers for evening prayer. They have worshipped here, in this tradition, since before Islam came to Persia. Their church traces its roots to the 1st century, to missionaries who traveled the old roads east. They have survived every dynasty, every conquest, every shift of power by keeping faith and keeping quiet. They have heard about Khomeini. They have heard him called a liberator. They pray carefully, the way people pray who have learned that careful prayer is sometimes the only armor available. The Simurgh writes their names in her margin. She will need them later. Chapter 5, The Year of the Gatherings. 1977. Jimmy Carter enters the White House on a platform that includes human rights, and while he does not mean this to unsettle American allies like the Shah, Iran is too strategic, too oil-rich, too important to the Cold War architecture. The language reaches Iran and creates a small loosening. A few degrees of experimental tolerance. Into that margin, things begin. A poetry reading at the Goethe Institute in Tehran. Writers and intellectuals gather and stay for 4 hours, electrified by the simple fact of being in a room with their own thoughts spoken aloud. Open letters circulate. 140 writers sign one requesting freedom of expression. Lawyers sign one. Judges. Each signature is an act of courage, because each signatory knows that Savak has a list and will add their name to it. In the mosques, the sermon circuit shifts. The anniversary of the 15th of Khordad is commemorated with new urgency. Ashura, always the occasion for passionate public mourning, is inflected now with the language of present injustice. Who plays Yazid today? Who is the modern Hussein? In January 1978, a government newspaper publishes an attack on Khomeini, accusing him of being a British agent, of sexual immorality, of treason. It is contemptible and obviously fabricated, and in Qom, where Khomeini had once taught, seminary students pour into the streets. The security forces fire. In Shia tradition, the dead are mourned on the 40th day after death, and on the 40th day, people gather again, and are fired upon again, and 40 days later gather again. The revolution runs on the liturgical calendar of grief, each massacre feeding the next commemoration, the cycle of mourning and protest spiraling upward through the year with the momentum of something that has been set in motion and cannot be stopped without a violence that would only accelerate it. Black Friday, September 8, 1978. Jaleh Square, Tehran. The government has declared martial law overnight. Many of the people arriving in the morning do not know this. They come with the habit of the previous months, believing this is another demonstration in a series of demonstrations. The soldiers are there. Many of them are young, from the same neighborhoods as the protesters, conscripts who did not choose this posting. The order comes. They fire. The dead are numbered in dozens to hundreds, depending on who is counting and what they need the number to be. The precise count matters less than the moral fact. A government shot its people in a public square on a sunny afternoon, and afterward the question changed. It was no longer how do we reform this government? It was how do we end it? By December, the demonstrations number in the millions. On the days of Ashura, an estimated 10 million Iranians take to the streets simultaneously in cities across the country. Not organized by any single party, not commanded by any central authority, simply moving in the same direction with the momentum of a people who have decided that the cost of this particular future is too high. The Shah's generals understand the arithmetic before the Shah does. There are not enough bullets. There is not enough army. The thing they have served is already over. Chapter 6. The Last Flight of the King of Kings. The Shah is sick. The lymphoma spreading through him is not widely known. He takes his medications. He receives advice from people telling him contradictory things. He looks at photographs of the demonstrations and cannot make the millions of people cohere with the Iran he believes he has built for them. The highways and the universities and the atomic energy program and all the modern apparatus of a nation in the 20th century. He cannot make them fit with the gratitude he expected. He tries liberalizing gambits, releases political prisoners, allows opposition newspapers, appoints new prime ministers. Each concession, made too late and under pressure, is read not as generosity, but as evidence that the structure is cracking. He has made the foundational error of autocrats. He confused a nation that obeyed him with a nation that supported him, and now that the difference has been made visible, there is nothing behind the throne except the throne. On January 16, 1979, Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi boards a plane at Mehrabad Airport, carrying a small container of Iranian soil and a disease eating him from inside. He says he is going on vacation. He says he will return. The people who put him on the plane know he will not. Below, the city erupts. Statues are pulled down. Photographs of the Shah are burned in the streets. The rejoicing is real, enormous, and belongs genuinely to people who have suffered under a repressive autocracy for a generation. The Simurgh does not begrudge them this moment. She has seen enough history to know that some moments of relief are earned, even when what comes after is not relief. 2,600 years of continuous Iranian monarchy, interrupted by invasions but never truly ended, have ended. Quietly, in an airplane, a sick man looking out a window at the country receding below him. The return, February 1st, 1979. Air France Flight 4721 descends through winter sky toward Mehrabad. On board are Ayatollah Khomeini, his inner circle, and 150 journalists who have been permitted on the plane because Khomeini understands the value of an audience. 5 million people wait at the airport and along the roads leading from it. They have waited for hours in the cold. They carry flowers, photographs, the accumulated weight of 15 years of cassette tapes and whispered sermons and 40-day mourning cycles. They are there because they believe, with absolute sincerity, across a breathtaking range of political hopes, that this arrival is the beginning of something better. A journalist asks Khomeini, somewhere over the Mediterranean, what he feels about returning after 15 years. He says, nothing. The answer will be passed for decades. Some read it as mystic detachment. Some read it as political discipline. The Simurgh reads it as information, and she files it. Chapter 7. What the Revolution Built. A revolution is a dream, dreamed collectively, by people who cannot agree on the dream, but agree on the nightmare. The Iranian Revolution of 1979 was a dream dreamed by secular liberals, religious conservatives, Marxist guerrillas, displaced peasants, nationalist merchants, and pious women in hijab marching beside unveiled university students, all of them walking in the same direction, toward the end of the Shah, away from something they agreed was intolerable. They agreed on very little else. The Simurgh has been here before: France in 1793, Russia in 1917, China in 1949. She knows the pattern. The broad coalition that overthrows a tyrant contains within it, always, the seeds of the next tyranny. The most organized, the most patient, the most willing to outmaneuver their allies once the common enemy is gone. They inherit the revolution. And the people who marched for a different dream discover, in the morning after jubilation, that their dream was not the one that won. What won was Khomeini's dream, and Khomeini moved quickly. The elimination of allies, the secular left, the Fedayeen guerrillas, the Tudeh communists, the Mujahideen-e-Khalq, had helped make this revolution. They had fought Savak, filled the prisons, died for it. They believed, because they were educated people who had read their political theory, that Khomeini was a useful symbol, a religious figurehead who would be guided aside once the serious work of governance began. They were wrong with the completeness that only very intelligent people can achieve when they have decided that their theory is more reliable than the man standing in front of them. By 1981, the Mujahideen-e-Khalq, once revolutionary allies, are conducting bombings against the Islamic Republic. By 1983, the Tudeh party is broken, its leadership arrested, its members tortured into televised confessions, its offices closed, its history erased. The Fedayeen are banned. Across the political left, the pattern repeats: use, then eliminate. The revolutionary execution squads that had once executed the Shah's men now execute Marxists in the same courtyards with the same efficiency. In the summer of 1988, in the single darkest chapter of the Islamic Republic's founding decade, thousands of political prisoners, mostly members of the Mujahideen-e-Khalq and leftist organizations, people already in prison serving their sentences, are called before revolutionary committees and asked a single question: are you still committed to your organization? Those who say yes are taken out and hanged. Estimates run from 3,000 to 5,000 killed over the course of several weeks. Their families are not notified. The bodies are buried in mass graves. The graves are, in some cases, built over. The regime has never acknowledged it. The dead are still being counted. The Simurgh turns to her ledger and opens the pages she set aside earlier. She reads the names she wrote in the margins. The Baha'is, Iran's Baha'i community, approximately 300,000 people, followers of a faith that emerged from 19th century Persia, that considers itself a continuation of the Abrahamic revelations, that the Islamic Republic considers heresy of the most dangerous kind, an Iranian heresy, a homegrown apostasy. Within months of Khomeini's return, the systematic dismantling begins. Their national spiritual assembly is dissolved. Their institutions are declared illegal. Their holy places are seized, some destroyed. Their leaders are arrested and tried on charges of espionage for Israel. The accusation is circular, almost elegant in its viciousness. The Baha'i World Center is in Haifa, therefore Baha'is are Zionist agents, therefore their execution is just. More than 200 Baha'is are executed in the early years of the Republic. Hundreds more imprisoned. Thousands lose their jobs, their pensions, their access to universities. The charges: corruption on earth, apostasy, espionage. The real charge: you exist and we do not permit you to exist. They do not fight back. Their faith prohibits partisan political involvement. They respond to each wave of persecution with what they call dignified acquiescence, continuing to build their community underground, continuing to run informal schools for children denied access to education, continuing to insist by their very survival on the legitimacy of their presence. The Simurgh notes this form of courage, which is quieter and harder than the kind that carries a weapon. The Jews. Iran's Jewish community is one of the oldest in the world, descendants of those who did not return to Zion when Cyrus permitted it in the 6th century BCE, who stayed and built their lives in Persian soil across 2.5 millennia. Before the revolution, approximately 80,000 Jews live in Iran, a community integrated into the commercial and professional life of the country. Persian-speaking, culturally Iranian, in many ways more Persian than Jewish in their daily existence. Khomeini told them, through intermediaries, that his quarrel was with Zionism, not with Judaism. This was always more a political calculation than a theological position, and it evaporated quickly. In May of 1979, 4 months after Khomeini's return, Habib El-Ghanian, one of the most prominent Jewish businessmen in Iran, is arrested on charges of corruption and espionage for Israel. He is 66 years old. He is tried before a revolutionary court in a session lasting less than an hour. He is executed by firing squad. The Jewish community hears the message. They begin to leave. By the early 1980s, more than half have gone. To Israel, to the United States, to anywhere that is not here. Those who remain face the specific indignity of official tolerance without equality. Testimony worth less than a Muslim's in court, restricted access to government employment, the ambient pressure of a state ideology that regards them as suspect by definition. The community that has been in Persia since before the Persian Empire has been effectively ended in the space of a decade. The Christians, Iran's Armenian and Assyrian churches, are among the oldest Christian communities on earth, their roots in the region predating Islam by centuries. They are recognized as minorities, technically permitted their worship, but the permissions narrow. Christian schools are forced to admit Muslim students and then nationalized. Leaders are required to sign pledges that they will not proselytize, will not, in other words, tell anyone about their faith. The walls around the historic communities grow higher every year. It is the converts who face the full weight of what the Islamic Republic means when it says religious freedom. A Muslim who converts to Christianity has committed apostasy. The jurisprudential consequence, under strict Islamic law, is death. The Republic applies this with consistency and creativity. Pastors are arrested on charges of acting against national security. House church leaders disappear into Evin. Some are killed in circumstances that the authorities describe as accidents or suicides. In January 1994, Bishop Haik Hovsepian Meir, the leader of the Assemblies of God churches in Iran, the most prominent advocate for imprisoned Christians in the country, is found stabbed to death 3 days after publicly securing the release of Pastor Mehdi Dibaj, who had been sentenced to death for apostasy. 3 months later, Dibaj himself is murdered. The same year, another Assemblies of God pastor, Tateos Michaelian, is found shot. The Simurg writes their names in full in her ledger: Haik Hovsepian Meir, Mehdi Dibaj, Tateos Michaelian. She writes them here because the political history of the Iranian Revolution tends not to make room for them, and she has made it her business to write down what the political history leaves out. She notes also, because she has been watching long enough to see this pattern, the underground Christian community in Iran, the network of Muslim background believers who meet in apartments, who memorize scripture in case their Bibles are taken, who baptize each other in bathtubs and call each other brother and sister across cell phone connections the government cannot fully monitor, is, by every measure available, growing. It is growing faster than any other Christian community in the world. The Simurg does not fully understand this, but she writes it down because it seems to her the kind of fact that matters. The hostages, November 4, 1979. Student revolutionaries seize the American embassy in Tehran and take 52 American citizens captive. Khomeini's blessing follows almost immediately and then enthusiastically. The analysis of this event runs quickly in the political histories to the strategic. Khomeini used the crisis to outmaneuver his internal rivals, to consolidate authority, to make the clerical faction indispensable in negotiations. This analysis is accurate and almost entirely beside the point. 52 people are imprisoned. They have been convicted of nothing. They are blindfolded and paraded before cameras. They are subjected to mock executions. Their mail is controlled, their sleep disrupted, their psychological condition deployed as a bargaining chip by a government that calls their captivity justice. They will be held for 444 days. They are not symbols. They are a Marine sergeant who had hoped to be home for Christmas, a communications officer 2 years from retirement, a secretary who had taken the posting because she wanted to see the world. The Simurg insists on this, on the specific humanity of the people in this story who become, in its political retelling, merely part of the background of larger events. They are not background. They are the event. The hostage crisis ends the revolution's international legitimacy as anything other than what it is: a theocratic state that imprisons diplomats, violates international law, and calls this a victory for God. The 44 years of frozen relations that follow are not a diplomatic abstraction. They are a consequence, paid by ordinary people on both sides, for a decision made by men who were interested in power and not interested in the cost. Chapter 8. The Fire That Remains. The Islamic Republic has now outlasted the Soviet Union by more than 3 decades. It has executed tens of thousands of its own citizens, imprisoned hundreds of thousands more, fought a catastrophic 8-year war with Iraq that killed perhaps 500,000 Iranians, funded proxy armies across the Middle East in service of an ideology that most Iranians under 40 have never chosen, and maintained its grip on power through a combination of genuine religious conviction among its supporters, institutional control over all levers of coercion, and the specific practiced art of making dissent too expensive to sustain. And yet the dissent keeps coming. In 1999, students protest at their universities and are beaten in their dormitories by paramilitaries while the police watch. In 2009, millions contest a stolen election under the green banners of the reform movement and are met with clubs, disappearances, show trials. In 2019, fuel price increases trigger protests across the country that the government suppresses with live ammunition. Hundreds killed in a matter of days. The internet cut so that the killing cannot be filmed, the world learning about it piecemeal and too late. In 2022, a 22-year-old Kurdish Iranian woman named Mahsa Amini is detained by the morality police for wearing her hijab improperly. She dies in custody. Her name spreads across Iran in hours. Young women remove their hijabs and burn them in the streets. Young men stand with them. The slogan, Zan, Zendegi, Azadi, woman, life, freedom. The government responds as it always responds. Hundreds are killed, thousands are imprisoned. The protests are suppressed, as they have always been suppressed, and the condition that produced them is unchanged. The Simurg looks at the face of Mahsa Amini and thinks of the woman in 1978 listening to the cassette tape in the dark, thinking, soon. Those two women are connected across 4 decades by the same refusal, the refusal to accept that this is all there is. The revolution of 1979 did not answer that refusal. It gave it a new form and a new oppressor, and called it liberation. On what history is for, the Simurg has been watching history long enough to know what it is and what it isn't. It is not a story of progress, of humanity moving forward through its own momentum towards some better destination. The evidence does not support that story. Every revolution she has watched has produced, in the hands of the people who won it, a new form of the thing it promised to destroy. The specific cruelties change. The fundamental problem, that human beings given unchecked power tend to use it the way the Shah used it, the way Khomeini used it, the way every regime she has watched has used it, does not change. What history is, in her experience, is a record of what was done and by whom and to whom. A record that has a disturbing tendency to leave out the people whose suffering was not strategically useful to either side of the story. The Baha'is, the Jews, the Christians, the 52 people in a basement in Tehran. The Iranian Revolution mattered enormously. It restructured the Middle East. It permanently altered the relationship between the Islamic world and the West. It produced a state whose foreign policy decisions have caused incalculable suffering across the region. It also produced, in the same motion, a generation of Iranians who grew up inside the republic that Khomeini built and have spent their adult lives trying to build something else, something better, something that does not require them to choose between their faith and their freedom, between their Iranian identity and their human dignity. The Simurg does not know how their story ends. She has been watching long enough to know that she never does. Not really. That every story she closes turns out to have had more pages, that the endings she has noted have always been middle chapters in something she couldn't see from where she was standing. She notes the underground church meeting in the apartment with the curtained windows. She notes the Baha'i community maintaining its schools in secret, its institutions invisible to the state that would destroy them. She notes the Jewish families in Los Angeles and Tel Aviv who still speak Persian to their grandchildren, who still cook the food they made in Isfahan and Tehran, who carry 2.5 millennia of Persian Jewish identity in their recipes and their prayers, and their obstinate refusal to let go of what was theirs. She notes Mahsa Amini, whose name has become a word that means something larger than one woman. She writes it all down. That is what she does. She writes it down so that it is not forgotten, so that the people who tell this story later, the ones standing where we cannot see, in years we cannot yet count, will know not just who won, but who was lost, and what it cost, and who paid. In a city that changes its name depending on who is asking, Tehran to some, the capital of a republic to others, simply home to the ones who still live in it, a woman teaches her daughter to read. The girl is 8, she is learning Persian, the language of Hafez and Ferdowsi, the language in which the revolution was dreamed and argued and lost and continued. She finds a photograph, a street in 1979. Millions of faces, all of them moving in the same direction. She asks, what were they going toward? The woman is quiet for a moment. She looks at the photograph, at all those faces, all those separate hopes wearing the same expression. She says, something better. They believed they were going toward something better. The girl looks at the photograph for a long time. She asks, did they get there? The room is quiet. Outside, the city breathes. The simmer closes her ledger. Not because the story is finished, because this is where she puts the pen down tonight. Tomorrow there will be more to write. End. A note on the history. This essay is literary historical narrative, employing the mythological simurg as a framing device and using composite or representative characters alongside documented historical events. The core facts are historically established. The 1953 CIA-backed coup against Mossadegh, Operation Ajax, the founding and methods of Savak,